Oh, the technological challenges we have in the modern world. I am over it. Last night, power went out. We had a power surge. And, well, the power was only out for like 5 seconds. Of course, that was enough to throw all the computers into a hissy fit. So we didn't have any internet. It threw our servers for a loop for some reason or another, or whatever you call the things that get us to the internet. And because we didn't have the internet, we had no phones. And it was only 4:15 when it happened. So we're still in business, but the people that are out there trying to call and check on their cars, they think we're out of business. We're just mean people because we're not answering the phone, and they need their car back. And General Motors announced yesterday, their stock is really going up for some reason or another. But yeah, they announced yesterday that these computers that we rely on so much are going to be driving their cars in 2028. I'm glad I'm not a GM owner. They won't be driving all the cars. It'll be, I'm sure, an available technology. Something you have to pay extra for, probably have to subscribe for. See, that's the big trend right now, folks. Subscription services. Yes, when you buy a car, just about any car in the not-too-distant future, it'll be equipped with every single option that they can possibly make, including heated seats. Although on your window, or on your window label, the window sticker, it won't say that it has heated seats. The car has it. It's just not listed there, and you didn't pay for it. But you will have to pay to use it if you want it. It'll be a subscription. BMW tried that. They made a lot of people angry. You think if you buy a BMW, pay that kind of money, it should have heated seats. Well, so did most of the BMW buyers, and they appreciated the heated seats for the first 90 days because it was free. They were on a trial basis. Boy, I used my heated seats this morning. It was 39 degrees here in East Tennessee, and I jumped into my car, and I was cold. And so I turned on my heated seats and my heated steering wheel, and I got warm pretty quickly. Before the car actually warmed up, I was feeling warm. And so you think about that as a subscription service. One day you go out to your vehicle, fire it up, turn on your heated seats, and they don't work. I don't think people are going to love that, but that's what's coming. Subscription features. Features that you have to pay for, like, Blue Cruise. I have Blue Cruise on my F-150, my 2024 Platinum F-150. But it doesn't work because it's either 90 days or 6-month trial on the Blue Cruise. I mean, it was okay. My wife was not real happy with it. Put your hands back on the steering wheel. Honey, I'm using the Blue Cruise. You trust that? Well, not 100%. That's why my hands are really close to the steering wheel. Yeah, AI is supposed to make these automated driving services a whole lot more reliable. In other words, so you're going down the interstate and you're getting ready to pass an 18-wheeler. Now, when you get up real close to it, are you moving away from it just a tad bit? I do. I might hug the left lane. I'm going to look in my left mirror to make sure nobody's over there, but I'm going to move over because I don't want to be real close to that 18-wheeler. Now, when I had the Blue Cruise on, it acted like that 18-wheeler wasn't even there and kept going right down the center of my lane, which would be appropriate under normal circumstances, but not with an 18-wheeler roaring right beside me. So what AI is going to do, it's going to recognize the fact, it's going to really notice how you drive. It's going to take note of the little things that you do, the little quirks that you do, hopefully just the good ones, and it will adjust. For example, it will learn that you don't like to be right beside an 18-wheeler at about 2 feet away. No, it doesn't. You don't like that. You always move over, so when it sees an 18-wheeler, it'll move over. Are you going to trust that? Is that going to make you feel good about, getting a paper copy of USA Today and reading it while you're going down the interstate? There have been some people die doing that in Teslas, watching movies. I'll never forget going past a vehicle. We were in Alabama, heading to Birmingham, Alabama. And we were driving in the slow lane. That's the one on the right-hand side. And we were passing a vehicle in the fast lane, the one on the left. And as we passed it, I noticed that this dude had his cell phone mounted up on his dash, and he was watching a movie. Had his arms crossed, watching a movie. And the car was driving itself. It was a Tesla. That's just not good. That's not what you're supposed to do. Why do humans do that? Why do humans break the rules? You know, there were just a bunch of rule breakers. I was so upset the other day. I was walking along a road that runs behind my house. I have probably, 500 yards of road frontage behind my house. And just looking at all the trash, mostly Bud Light cans. That must say something about, I don't know whether it does or not. I'm not going to make any judgment calls. A lot of McDonald's bags, a whole bunch of business cards. I don't know how that happened. I know the guy that owns the business. I think they must have been sitting on top of a truck, and the wind caught it and blew them off all over my property. I don't know, but I've got probably 400 or 500 business cards I've got to go down there and pick up. I ought to call him and have him come pick them up. But yeah, people litter. I do not understand that mindset, to think that it's okay to roll down your window and throw something in somebody else's yard. Of course, I don't understand. One of my other neighbors has these poles up beside his mailbox so that people won't bash his mailbox. I don't think I did, although I must admit, I did throw some eggs, and that's probably one of the worst things you can do when I was a teenager. And the worst part about that, the worst part was that I was doing it. The second worst part was that I got caught, and my parents found out. And I got to go back to their house and clean up the side of their house and the window. Really, I didn't throw them. I was just the getaway man. I was the driver. My buddy threw the eggs. And I distinctly remember, the reason that I got caught is because the people whose house got hit with the eggs, they happened to know my mom and dad. And I happened to be driving my dad's Caprice convertible with dealer tags on the back of it. I mean, there's your forensic evidence right there. It didn't take a CSI expert to figure that one out. So they called my parents, and my mom answered the phone, and the lady said, "Can I speak to Mr. Lawson?" And she said, "Well, sure." And Dad came to the phone and said, "Mr. Lawson, what does your son have against us?" He said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, he drove by and threw eggs at our house." I didn't get to use his car for quite some time after that. So I guess I'm the pot calling the kettle black. Anyway, I'll take my first break. I'll be back here in just a minute. I had a lady in the service department the other day, and she was having to spend some money. Her husband was having to spend some money. It was his truck, and she brought it in. And she was sitting there waiting because we were having to put a new turbocharger on it. Now, this vehicle had I think it was close to 200,000 miles. And that's pretty good longevity for turbochargers compared to the way they used to fail back in the early days when they first came out with them. I remember Chevrolet came out with a 3.8-liter V6 that they put in Buick Grand National. Some of you guys may remember that car. It was a two-door black Buick, basically a Buick, what was that, Century? And but they called it a Grand National, and it was really fast. It had a 3.8-liter V6 with a single turbocharger that was very prone to failure. Well, they decided to stick a detuned version of that into Chevy Monte Carlo. We sold a couple of them, and then we decided not to order any more of those because both of them were in the shop more than they were in the owner's driveway. But that's not the way it is today. These turbochargers that Ford has come out with in their EcoBoost engines, that's what it stands. Well, when you say EcoBoost, when you say the word boost, that means turbocharging. Because this lady wanted to know, Lenny, what does a turbocharger do? And I said, well, my best example of that is that when you're trying to get a fire started and you blow on it, what happens? Well, the flame goes up. That's right. That's what turbochargers do. They increase the amount of air going into the engine. And most turbochargers today have something else that makes it even better. They have something called an intercooler. And what that does is that cools the air, because really what spins the turbocharger is exhaust. The exhaust that's coming out of the engine is coming out with pretty good force, like blowing really hard, and it spins these little vanes inside this turbocharger, like a little wheel. And on the other side of that wheel is another wheel that is bringing in air to blow into the engine. Well, the intercooler cools that air. And what happens when you blow cooler air inside of a combustion chamber in an engine? Gives it even more power. I don't know why cold air is better than hot air, but it is as far as engines are concerned. Is that making things too simplistic? There's a lot of things that make an engine efficient, to make it run right. I have a mechanic working on a 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air that I bought. Ever since I've had it, it hasn't run. Well, it would run. It just wouldn't. When you would put your foot on the gas, it would just choke down and die, which is not what I really wanted. I wanted to be driving the thing. So the mechanic suggested that we rebuild the carburetor. So we did. We put the carburetor back on it. Same problem. Now, the carburetor had a lot of issues. A lot of the parts, apparently, that were put into the carburetor were put in backwards. So whoever rebuilt it the first time didn't do a very good job. But because the carburetor was struggling so much, apparently the mechanics had adjusted the valves to the point where they could at least get it to go down the road. Well, now that the carburetor is set up properly, now the valves need to be readjusted, because it just will not create any vacuum. And when you don't have vacuum in an engine, it doesn't run. And so that's what we're working on right now. But see, those engines are very simple. A really good mechanic, old school mechanic, can figure something out in an old car like that just so easily. There's no computers to hook up to it. You don't have to have a master's degree in electrical engineering to be able to work on a 1957 Chevy. You just have to know basic mechanics. As a matter of fact, the guy that's working on it that discovered this problem, probably 10 years ago, he was a lawnmower mechanic. And he's got the skills. He knows exactly what needs to be done. I said, how did you learn all this stuff? He said, just doing it. His dad just said, go fix that lawnmower. He said, I think I was around 8 years old, and I didn't know anything about engines. He coached me along, and I finally got the lawnmower running. And that's how I got started working on lawnmowers. This is him talking. And then he started working at a shop that worked on small engines, weed eaters, all that kind of stuff, chainsaws. And he decided that there wasn't any money in that, and tried to get a job at a new car dealership and couldn't get a job anywhere at any new car dealership. Why? Because he didn't have enough experience. You're a lawnmower mechanic? Well, we gave him a chance. We put him to work in our quick lane, which is all you have to do is change oil. He certainly knew how to do that. He knew how to replace a filter. He knew how to look at a belt and tell if it's worn out. He could look at brakes as well. He'd done a lot of brake jobs on his dad's vehicles and neighbors' vehicles, and had a little garage behind his house, and that's how he learned it. I don't even think he graduated from high school. But see, those days are over when it comes to working on modern vehicles. He can still function. He works on a lot of my older vehicles, but we've had to send him to school and upgrade his skills. And, the problem with this gentleman is he has great skill and great knowledge, but he's not a good test taker. And when you go to these schools, you have to take a test at the end, and he struggles with that. But, of course, I wouldn't let somebody go because of that, because he's too valuable. He can fix a lot of other things. He's a master on our alignment machine. He's just really good. So one of the things that I've always worked really hard my entire career, and of course I picked this up from my dad, is to just look for character first. And then, if somebody has the right character, then they can learn to do just about anything. If they have a good work ethic, they show up on time, they keep their areas relatively clean. He's not an expert at that, but you can't have everything. But he's always looking for something to do. When he's not on a job, he doesn't have 3 or 4 cars on a lift at the same time. He's bored, and he's looking for something else. While he's waiting on parts for that particular vehicle. These are the kind of people that we need in this society, because everybody can't be an engineer designing things, people selling things, working in administrative jobs, working on computers. Somebody is going to have to know how to weld. Somebody is going to have to know how to actually turn wrenches, pull transmissions, pull engines, do brake jobs, test drive vehicles, understand what might be the issue and put them up on a lift. All of those mechanical things. A computer can't do that. I use AI all the time for different things. It's basically my search engine now. I rarely Google something. I use ChatGPT. But I get criticized for it all the time. It's amazing how people that don't use it push back on using it at all. I've introduced it to a couple of my mechanics. Okay, so I've got this guy that works on our tractors and lawnmowers up at Green Outdoor. And I was describing to him what ChatGPT and Perplexity and those types of AI bots, what they do. And he said, I'd like to try that. And I showed him the ChatGPT. I told him to download the app, and they get a chance to try it for free. And so he did. I saw him a week later. He said, Lenny, I can't thank you enough. You can't believe how many problems this has solved for me. I can even take a picture of a part, and it will tell me where to find it. He needed some information on a particular repair issue that he was having with a TYM tractor. He didn't know exactly what the process was to disassemble and reassemble this particular thing. He asked the question to ChatGPT, and in seconds, step-by-step instructions on what to do. Now, ChatGPT can't do the work, but it can certainly shorten the time frame. Rather than looking all over the world trying to find something on Google, trying to find an article that will address the situation that you're trying to fix. So whether it's a turbocharger and trying to understand what that is, or instructions on how to fix a TYM tractor, you can find it there. Is it always going to be right? No, probably not. But it will point you in the right direction, and most of the time, I say probably not, I would say more likely probably, because there's a lot of data that it's able to put together in an instant, in a heartbeat. We are headed for uncharted waters when it comes to this and how it affects our car life and our regular everyday life. I'm very interested in taking advantage of the technology. If it can make my dealership better, if it can help us make better decisions, financial decisions, if it can help me analyze, my financial statements and help me figure out ways to better invest my money, then I think that's a win for now. Who knows what will happen in the future? I'm not worried about World War III. I'm just worried about today, here, now. I'll be back in just a minute. So I was at the house. I was by myself with one of my grandchildren, one of my grandsons. And I said, "You want to watch a movie?" He said, "Sure." And I said, "Well, let's go over and pick one out." "What do you mean pick one out?" Well, I've got all these DVDs over here." "What's a DVD?" Now, he's 5 years old, no, 6, and he doesn't know what a DVD is. I showed him all the ones that I have, and I said, "You want to watch Despicable Me?" He said, "Yeah." "How's that work?" And I opened up the case and showed him the disc, and he said, "I've never seen one of those before." Folks, is it moving that fast? It sure is. You know, basically when he wants to see a movie, he grabs my iPad and just uses his finger to, go to, I don't know, we don't let him go to Netflix or something like that, but he is able to access things so much more quickly. He doesn't have to open a DVD player, hit the open button, pull the DVD out of the case, stick it down in there, and then close it and hit the play button. He doesn't have to do that. He just touches something, moves his finger around, or even talks into the remote control now. I mean, my granddaughter, she's, 8? She's talking to the remote control. This technology thing is don't let it get ahead of you. If you want to live a simpler life, I understand that. I wish in many ways that I could go back in time, but it was okay back then. Everybody thinks about, well, it was so great in the 70s. Really? Was it? I don't know. That's when I got caught throwing eggs. Well, thanks for listening to this edition of My Car Guru. If you need me, you know how to get me, 423-552-2020. That's my cell phone number, the only one I have, or you can send me an email to LennyLawson2020@gmail.com, and I'll see you on the next edition of My Car Guru.